Let's go!
For anybody that doesn't know, yeah, there was more interviews that popped up with the Final Fantasy VII team. They're not able to answer anything directly about Part 3 because they said they're just not ready to, but they will be soon. Which is like, oh really? So if you want like the best place on the internet for like translations of a lot of this Final Fantasy directly related stuff, hit up Shinra Arc. Shinra Arc on Twitter has like some of the best translations, some of the most up-to-date news. So if you guys are looking for like future FF7 info that's coming from Japan and is being translated, highly recommend Shinra Arc. Has done a whole bunch of community stuff regarding the old translations of the old games, all that kind of stuff, you know? One of the only reasons to actually have Twitter. You've described Remake as a rebuild, not a rewrite. How has that philosophy guided your approach to the iconic story scenes? The core themes of FF7, life, legacy, humanity, remain unchanged, but it has been decades since the original. Cultures, tech, and even players' perspectives have changed. We consider all that carefully. Part 3 is progressing well, and I think it'll be exciting and satisfying for longtime fans. We've also announced that Part 2 is on its way to Switch 2. A reminder, please buy this later. Yeah, yes, we know. It being a pseudo-sequel. It's not a sequel. If it was like an actual sequel, it would follow the events and ignore the things that had happened. It would just that could have happened after. So to me, it's like everything about FF7 wants to have its cake and eat it too. It definitely does. It's a requel, yes. It wants to continue the characters in the story, do something that puts you in a different, brings the characters to different conclusions, different situations. But, I mean, obviously, man, like, Aerith and Sephiroth are from the future. So we know where this is going, but that still allows them to rebuild the story in a way that makes sense. Yeah, I heard they did a similar thing with Evangelion. I don't know. Ah! Glenn's face out of here. Freaking scared the shit out of me, dude. FF7 Plus, in a way. Yeah, in a way. The goal was to never discard the original's emotional core or narrative beats. Instead, the team focused on enhancing moments that were limited by hardware. Environments like Midgar can now be fully realized thanks to Switch 2's improved specs, which allowed the team to present key scenes and detail at full performance. They're saying this because it's like, bro, Switch 2 version, please buy it. Hamaguchi made it clear that this version of Remake isn't about technical improvements, it's also about preserving the impact of the story. He wants longtime fans to feel the exact sentiment and surprise they did in 97. It hopes new players can experience the feeling for the first time. Yeah, it's like, and I get it, they're doing a good job, right? I do think they are doing a good job at trying to keep things captivating for the old audience. Not everyone's going to be down for it because obviously, like, people that want things to only be that way are going to be that way. But I like that this doesn't overwrite the original. It isn't like a Metal Gear 3 or a Dead Space remake. Those remakes feel like there's very little reason to play the old games. Maybe unless you're a super hardcore. It feels like we're just gonna give you this game now, but way better looking. The Crisis Core remake is 100% that way. Why the hell am I ever gonna go back and play the PSP Crisis Core, dude? We're seeing the exact opposite with Final Fantasy Tactics. Like, there might be very little reason to go back and play War of the Lions, much less the PlayStation version, after this version of Tactics comes out. There's very little reason, you know? Ah! Stop it! Jesus! Why? Assuring fans that development for Part 3 and the rest of the remakes has not been affected by this port. Hamaguchi gives some insights into the Nintendo approach, starting with the younger audiences that their titles attract. The player base for Nintendo games themselves is a younger crowd, so we wanted to reach out to these players. With Sephiroth and Cloud entering Smash Brothers, I think a lot of them are quite familiar with the characters in the franchise. Hamaguchi adds, I hope to continue supporting this so that players can not only get to know Final Fantasy VII, but will be an entryway for the rest of the Final Fantasy franchise as well. Yeah, that was always pretty crazy, you know? It was always pretty crazy that Smash got Sephiroth and Cloud, and they did not even have like a game outside of OG FF7. That was always crazy to me. How much community feedback did you implement into the development of the third part? Because of course, the first part and the second part are very different. Am I gonna get blamed for anything here? He says, yes, I think it's an important aspect. We do listen to a lot of feedback, obviously. It's important to us. Certainly one thing Kitase says, it's an advantage of the series that we can look at the results part way through because it's a trilogy of 3 games, and one of them will go out into the world and they'll get responses, and then we can look at that and reflect it in the next or later games. So that is definitely a part. It's important. It's a great opportunity to be able to do that. But I think one thing is very important when you look at feedback and opinions from players is what I want to avoid is having that adapt and change the core experience of the game. I think the core theme, core base, creative vision you have has to come from the creative team 100%, dude. It bugs me when fans start, projects are made by fans. I'm not even talking about Final Fantasy, dude. I'm talking about anything. When it feels like what fans want is piloting creative direction in anything, in game balance, in TV shows, in movies, in anything, it doesn't make anybody happy. Like, even the fans at times, it doesn't feel like it ever makes them directly happy. You know why? Because fans don't know what the hell they want. I'm just gonna say it right now. People, in general, do not know what they want. You have to be given something and realize and come to the discovery that this is cool. That is actually what you wanted. You wanted to discover something that you didn't even realize that you wanted it, right? So I think in many situations, specifically relying on fan feedback and changing projects all over the place based on that feedback is rough, man. You'd say the Sonic movie, yeah, like the Sonic movie is an example of fan feedback working the right way, but it didn't change the story. I get it. He looked like a weird ass hermit crab, but the core of the movie wasn't the way Sonic looked, dude. It was the story. Right? Making a good movie with Jim Carrey and all that kind of shit, just using the Sonic thing as an example, did not change the core of what that film was. It changed a visual aspect. For example, I don't think Cloud looks as cool in Rebirth as he does Remake. I hope that is reflected, that's fixed in the next game. I hope that's fixed. Because some of the lighting was a little funky, especially on character faces and shit. That's the exact same way. I think that's fan feedback that they absolutely can take into without compromising the entire experience of the game that the creative team came up with. Nomura, Nazuma, Katase, myself as well, we have to really get a solid idea of what game they want, what experience we want to create all down. And again, speaking on that fact, I think the way this game, Part 3, is going to work, Part 2 and Part 1, this was all figured out a decade ago, bro. Like, legit. I think this was figured out so long ago that it's probably one of the reasons why they ended up not working with CyberConnect 2. Because the scope of each game, not every game's gonna be the same thing as Part 1. Part 2 is gonna be a sprawling open world game. Part 3, we don't know what kind of game that's gonna be, you know? I think they looked at it and they're like, are these guys gonna be capable of doing this? Probably not. Maybe we should just learn how to do this ourselves and then just grow into it, and they did, and it worked. So that was a very good call on their part. But still, again, I think the foundation of what all these games was going to be as a remake series was figured out a long ass time ago, man. That really is our decision and our creative vision. But then you have to look at other aspects of the game where it's important to look at fan feedback. And certainly in terms of gameplay experience itself, like we got a lot of feedback for the mini games. Hey, great example. For example, I really like this minigame, or I thought this one was difficult, should have been done differently. The difficulty level is another thing we can really pay attention to and try to place it where we want it. Those kind of feedback is the nitty-gritty of the game, and the small details are very important. Hey, wonderful. Them hearing that, like, hey, there's no discoverability in Part 2. Like, we just checklist everything. That's stuff that they already talked about they're fixing. So anyway, we try to be proactive about reflecting that feedback, but certainly our awareness and the way we look at this and what we're aiming for is to make sure that the second game in the series is better than the first. It's a better experience overall. The third game, again, should also be a better experience because we've learned and we know what people want and what they like. So it's very interesting to do a series like this. And obviously it's a little bit unique because we're releasing 3 standalone packaged games. In a lot of ways, because it's an ongoing series of direct sequels, it's a lot like doing a service model in some ways, although not exactly the same. So it's unique balance in there in terms of how we have to deal with this feedback, and I'm very honored to be able to do it in this way because it's a unique experience that not many developers get. He's right, dude. Knowing that you have to make like 3 completely different games, but take the stuff that people liked from the previous games and focus on that and make sure it hits is kind of nuts. Like almost guaranteeing that Queen's Blood is coming back, but better. Oh yeah, that's definitely coming back. Think of the stuff that was like annoying in Part 2 and just hopefully getting answers to that stuff in the next game where it's like, oh yeah, if there's a bunch of chocobo traversal, that should be fun instead of annoying. Because most chocobo traversal was pretty friggin' annoying, dude. So it's good to hear them talk about this, you know? People love synergy attacks, people love the combat. Oh dude, if there's anything he talks about the combat. Talking about Part 3 and not wanting to deliver the exact same style of gameplay from Rebirth again. This has been a massive point of conversation I've been talking about for literally years since Rebirth came out. To all of us, we were asking questions. We're like, okay, so the next game is going to have this world to pick up on, right? The next game is going to have all of these assets, the grasslands, Junon, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to have everything. So are we just going to go back here and do it again? Are we just going to go back and activate towers again and then hunt the monsters in the area again and then do this again? And my presumption at the time was, I don't think so. I think they're going to have those things, but but the way that you engage with the environment, they're going to be there, but it will be different, was my impression. I did not see them as just making part 3 a Tears of the Kingdom, where it's just like, hey, here's the same world again. You engage with it almost the exact same way, but then there's underground and there's above ground. It's like, yeah, but it feels very familiar, you know? There's a very familiar feeling to this. Square revealed a short while ago that the remake trilogy, all parts of the game as you talked about, will release on Switch 2 and Xbox. And now, without revealing spoilers for the third part, what are the guiding principles that led to the development of the design of the third part of this remake story? Can you say anything about the third game? Shoutouts to, who was the original provider on this? N-Tower DE? Shoutouts to them for asking a bold question. So Hamaguchi says, like I said, there's not a huge amount. I can't really talk about specifics about the third game in the series. It's not time and we're not ready. I can talk about it in like abstract terms of how we're approaching it. And as you're very much aware, the first game in the series, Remake, was a story-driven, linear game that evolved and changed into a more open-world adventure game with Rebirth. And that seems to be very well regarded, Rebirth. Talking about FF7 Rebirth's critical reception being as high as it was. People seem to like that change a lot, and they like the new gameplay direction, so we're very happy with that. But moving forward to the third game in the series, obviously I can't say exactly what it is, but I don't want to make the exact same game and the exact same style of a gameplay experience that we had with Rebirth again. Hallelujah. We're going to evolve it and change it again to give another different and fresh take on Final Fantasy VII gameplay. Again, that will be revealed in the not too distant future. I can say we're working on it and we're trying to change that because we've actually got a build up and running in development with the team right now where you can experience that new style of gameplay. Before I read the rest, presumptions. I do not feel that the core gameplay, which is, let's say combat, right? Let's just say combat of the game is going to change that much. What they figured out of how to make Final Fantasy VII combat be like the old one and also be all action-packed and shit is very highly regarded. Some people won't like it because obviously there's going to be criticisms of anything that's not turn-based or turn-based like, but that combat system is fucking crazy, man. It's so cool. They really elevated and amplified the hell out of it in part 2, which is, it's almost hard to play part 1 because part 2 is so much better. There is clear paths that they could take with part 3 and that combat system to make it better, to make it more engaging, and to give you access to the full party. So I think that in the same way that we got a combat system from part 1 to part 2, so much better. Incredibly better combat system. I don't know if we're going to get an incredibly better one, but I think it is going to be a similar thing that is better. We're just going to get more cool stuff to do. I think triple synergy attacks is obviously a route they can go. Access to the full party is routes they can go. More cool stuff you can do with party members is very cool, man. People love that shit in Chrono Trigger back in the day, and it's one of the cooler things that's in part 2 already. What if you can do multi-team up attacks? Like, this is going to turn into the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 of like JRPG combat systems, but my dude, what if there's like literal giant team shit that you can build up to eventually? Multi-team techs. Fuck it. The sky's the limit. This is the last game, man. This is the last game to like literally pander to this audience and make these characters do the coolest team up shit ever. This is it. So to me, I don't really see them changing the entirety of combat. I don't see that happening. Personally speaking, it would be almost detrimental because of how improved the combat was over part 1. We have to think back to part 1 and 2. How much different it was to engage with the world. What did you do? If you weren't obviously like crit pathing things, dude, if you crit path Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1 and 2, it's not that crazy. If you crit path Part 1, that's a way better game. Doing only story stuff is actually, it makes Part 1 a way better game. It's like 25 hours and it's awesome. It's great, dude. But when you have to do like all of this stuff that sort of like pads out the game, it doesn't feel great. It doesn't feel necessarily like amazing. Rebirth, I don't know if it is that way, but I'm assuming it also is. Where Rebirth's first playthrough is like kind of magical, but on subsequent playthroughs, I'm like, yeah, I don't need to do all this shit again. I really don't need to do all this shit again. I kind of just want to like focus on the big moments and the big elements, you know? So that was a way that like you engaged with the world, you know? I'm very curious how I think exploration is going to be the goal of part 3, like legit exploration. In the same way that exploration and actual discovery was a huge part of the original Final Fantasy VII, and exploration and discovery were completely missing from part 2, man. You sort of got it on your first playthrough, but when you understood how every area worked and what the area was asking you to accomplish, by the time you got to Cosmo Canyon, you were like, oh, okay. I get it. You know, I'm going to scan this thing. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this. It needs to not be as formulaic, just in general. For a lot of Japanese devs, there is a lot of folks that are making games that are like, we're putting all this time into this content and people aren't going to do it, you know? We have to make sure they do it, you know? To me, that devalues the content. As a person that enjoys the discovery process of games and having the world engage the player, dude, the whole point of it is that you have to be able to miss it. Was the discovery obvious? Yeah, it was pretty obvious I needed to go that way and do that, but guess what? I didn't have the predisposition that I needed to go and do this shit. Figured out that I can go this way. There wasn't me just following a marker going this way or seeing that the one fog of war on the map, yada, 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 like all that kind of stuff. Guides exist for this shit, so we need to discover it. And I think that's one thing that was really fun about OG Final Fantasies. And to give massive credit to Expedition 33, holy shit, bro. My favorite part of that game was the fact that there was no maps in the zones. I loved it. And the fact that the world map was godlike. The exploration in Expedition 33 was fucking awesome. And I just felt like I was legit getting really cool things and I was discovering it even though it was right in front of my face. Everybody's gonna do this. But because of it, you can miss a ton of shit. You can miss so much stuff. Just running around and doing shit felt great. It's my deep hope that they just give us that on a large scale. Even Expedition 33's world is on a small scale, technically. It's practically like large chibi characters running around a small map. I feel like you can accomplish that PlayStation era Final Fantasy big open world on a large scale. And I think they're gonna do that in part 3, no shit. That's my hope. That's my personal hope of what the biggest gameplay difference will be from part 1 to part 2 to part 3. Where part 2 is getting you acclimated to the world and sort of like holding your hand through it. And part 3 is like, here's everything now. Go have fun. It's looking good. It's going in the right direction. The development's going well. And as I said, unfortunately, I'd love to be able to tell you about it, but I can't do that today. In the near future, we'll be able to announce it to everyone. And it really will be a fitting climax to the FF7 Remake series. So hopefully you can look forward to seeing that information come soon. But in the meantime, I invite everyone to check out FF7 Remake on Nintendo Switch and Xbox to get ready for the third game. Rebirth will be on that stuff too. You can have a lot of fun now and you'll have even more fun later. I've been having dreams. Like, ever since the first interview started happening and they were quite literally addressing part 3's existence, I've had dreams where I woke up the next day and I'm like, I can't believe it's FF7 part 3 day, and just wondering what they do with it. 2 days in a row I've had dreams of me like wondering, dude, where'd all that time go? It feels like we were just talking about this, and in my dream I'm like running around the world doing something that I can't pinpoint because it's a dream. But ever since this has happened, it's been like my brain has been racing with this stuff. Just go back to sleep. It's gonna take like a year and a half for this thing to exist. I get it. But all I gotta say is that as handholdy as Rebirth's world was, the first playthrough of that shit was magical. I could not believe what I was playing. Hamaguchi says, playing the original game as a fan and now being able to revisit as a dev has been profound. It's deepened his respect for the story and characters. With part 3, he hopes to deliver something that both honors that legacy and surprises the players. Cloud with the fusion sword, come on. It has to happen at some point. Follow me for a second. There is a flashback at some point where Cloud literally fights Sephiroth in a Advent Children style flashback. There is fusion sword mechanics. It plays differently. He plays differently than the character normally plays. Dope. But then you wake up from the dream and Cloud goes, that's weird. And then you just continue the game as you normally do and learn how to play the game that it wants you to play. But then you beat the game. And then on New Game Plus or hard mode, they're like, hey, here's that fusion sword with all of its mechanics, and you can use it in the regular game now. Just imagine. Please, dear God. I'm gonna go back to sleep. We're dying of geoligma. Geoligma. Damn. That's crazy.